TFT. Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live every Wednesday night this fall at 7:30. Coming up later tonight, Fog Facts. Author Larry Beinhart, best known for his book Wag the Dog, will help us search for those telling facts about national politics that are out there but somehow get lost in the fog. But we begin with tonight's edition of our series, The New York City Mayor's Race as Seen on TV. Each week until the election, we're monitoring the local news with the help of Baruch College graduate students to see how the mayoral campaign looks to viewers in the news stories and campaign commercials. This week, our students watched the 10 or 11 o'clock news Thursday through Sunday on channels 4 and 9. In the 4 nights combined, 8 newscasts in all, they only found 2 news stories total. They found 13 commercials, 12 for Mike Bloomberg, just 1 for Freddie Ferrer. Let's take a look at some of this. One of the 2 news stories was about the Democratic Brooklyn Borough President, Marty Markowitz, endorsing the Republican mayor, Mike Bloomberg. Here's part of that story from Channel 4.
Brooklyn Borough President Marty Markowitz threw his support behind the mayor, and 3 Queens elected officials also backed Bloomberg, adding to the growing list of Democrats in his corner.
Easy, and this hasn't been an easy decision for Marty. He's been a loyal Democrat, but he and I agree that as public servants, our highest obligation is to the people of this city and not to political parties.
So it's a horse race story, and to keep the animal metaphors flowing, you have the man bites dog element of Democrat endorsing Republican. Let's watch some more of this story and see how Democrat Ferrer responds.
The mayor's challenger, Fernando Ferrer, blasted Bloomberg for not following through on his promises from the last election. Ferrer was joined on the steps of City Hall with his former primary opponent, Congressman Anthony Weiner.
Mike Bloomberg's been giving a series of speeches these last couple of weeks, laying out his vision for a second term. Every single one of them is about the things he should have been doing already in his 4 years as mayor.
Ferrer said Markowitz would have to answer to Democrats for his endorsement of the Republican mayor.
So that was one of just 2 news stories in the 8 newscasts we monitored. The other story, by the way, was about Freddie Ferrer going to Puerto Rico to campaign. Unfortunately, video of that story is not available tonight. But with just 2 stories and 13 commercials, even to New Yorkers who watch the news every night, the narrative of this campaign is being created almost completely by the purse through advertising. Local TV journalism is taking a pass. We will look at some of the campaign commercials in just a minute, but let's talk to 2 guests about the state of the race and the coverage of the race. Carolina Gonzalez, freelance political reporter and former editorial writer for the New York Daily News, and Pat Healy, a New York Times Metro political correspondent, these days covering the mayor's race. Hi, Pat. Hi, Carolina. Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live. You know, we have poll numbers showing New Yorkers are most concerned about jobs, schools, housing, and yet there's almost no coverage of the issues in the race. When we get coverage of the race at all, Pat, it's about endorsements and things like that.
It's, as you said, it's man bites dog, and TV right now feels like that's what's going to get on the air. It's going to be something that is surprising, that has some kind of a hook. Generally, the feeling is that the schools are doing okay, crime is okay. I mean, this is a feeling that at least the Bloomberg people see in their poll numbers and among their voters. So it's really these sort of staged events that play to Bloomberg's theme, that he's an independent, that he's his own guy, and that he's so good, apparently, and so inevitable as a mayor to be reelected, that even Democrats, even Democratic leaders like Marty Markowitz are willing to come over.
But Carolina, what does the TV news even tell me that if that's what they think about Mayor Bloomberg. When we started the series and decided to count news stories, types of news stories, who the news stories were slanting toward, and also campaign commercials, we thought we might come up with a commercial-dominated narrative, but we didn't think it would be this overwhelmingly lopsided.
Well, I mean, Mayor Bloomberg is really trying to dominate the discussion, and he's trying to control the discussion to an extraordinary extent. I mean, if you look at what happened with the debates, that's the case. The fact that he has opted out of Campaign Finance Board sponsored debates. He basically doesn't want to have the opportunity to speak except in his official capacity as mayor. And when you don't have these clear actions and positions as a candidate, then it's I think it's a little hard to have something to chew on.
He opted out of one debate, Campaign Finance Board sponsored. He will be doing the other one.
Yeah, except that there was also another debate that was going to be sponsored by Hispanic Federation, National Association of Latino Elected Officials, El Diario, and Univision, and he opted out of that too, and that was canceled.
You know, Pat, I've been cataloging some of the issue differences between them, and they tend to run along class lines, and I think they're being underplayed. The mayor vetoed the bill to require decent health care for a certain group of grocery store workers, those who work at the bigger stores. City Council overrode his veto, so that's becoming law anyway. Ferrer supported that. Ferrer supported the new lead paint law. The mayor vetoed it, and council overrode it. Ferrer wants more taxes on the rich, a stock transfer tax to help fund schools, and a vacant residential land tax to help fund affordable housing. The mayor put in a property tax, which cuts more across the board. There are differences on mandatory inclusionary zoning, which means requiring developers of luxury housing to include probably 20% affordable units. So those are policy differences. And they run in a pattern, don't you think?
Absolutely. And if they were enough for Freddie Ferrer to break through the tens of millions of dollars that the mayor is spending on advertising, he would be hitting them over and over again. But right now, let's remember, this is a relatively popular incumbent with a lot of money. And Ferrer has been looking for a way to break through, to grab the imagination of voters and say, you need to oust this guy and put me in here. And all of the issues that you mentioned, while they go to themes that Ferrer hit quite a bit in 2001, for whatever reason, he's not hitting them the same way this year. He talks every now and then about, say, lead paint, in particular, but he's not taking it all together and creating that sort of thematic thematic divide in a sense. Well, there's reluctance after 2001. He got beaten up over his Two New Yorks theme. It was seen as, by some, divisive. By some as divisive. But I think he's also, as the nominee, going for something broader. He's trying to unite the party, unite independents behind a general critique that Mayor Bloomberg's leading the city in the wrong direction. But as you pointed out, there's not a lot of substance to that, and there's not enough, frankly, to give due to the TV reporters out there. He's not creating events on the campaign trail that work for images, that bring home people, that bring together, let's say, 10 New Yorkers from across the city who can talk about the grocery store bill in a way. I don't know why. Maybe the campaign is...
I'm curious. We're going to open up the phones for a couple of minutes here and see if anybody is out there who wants to call in and make a case for Freddie Ferrer. This is not to criticize Mike Bloomberg. We'll do that another week. You can call and give us the positive rationale, if you can, if anybody's going to call, for the Freddie Ferrer campaign. The number is 212-251-0801. I think you see it on your screen, 212-251-0801. Carolina, is he just failing to make his own case?
Well, I think Ferrer is spending a lot of time on the defensive. I mean, that's definitely one of the things that's going on. One of the other things that's going on is I would actually slightly disagree with Pat. I do think he has been hitting the issues. I would agree with Pat that it's not cohering, and that there isn't this sort of larger this larger campaign to get some of these stories out. But, doing that kind of work takes manpower and money. So even if he can't buy the ads, even putting the narrative out there takes a lot of time and money, which, you know, he's short on.
And there's a communication strategy that at least so far has been really hit or miss. I absolutely agree. Today he had an event on housing issues, a really important issue in the city, one that resonates, frankly, across a lot of lines, ethnic and economic, in terms of affordability in the city. And he had it with Andrew Cuomo. And it's the kind of event, though, you just look at it from a journalist's point of view, it's not going to get covered by television. It's two people standing and talking about an issue that's familiar, that's already been covered, and when TV producers are making up their minds about what are their segments that are going to be, it's not that kind of animating. A person over at the Democratic State Party said to me earlier today, the one thing that we can do is to mess up, you know, a Bloomberg event is to just send out our guy in the George W. Bush mask.
Right.
It's perfect because TV loves it. They always put it on. It's funny. It makes people smile. That's
for those who haven't seen it,
Yeah.
the Ferrer campaign has this guy they send out. It's probably different guys in different times. Same costume, though, George W. Bush, with a sign, usually, that says, "Thank you, Mayor Bloomberg, for your support." Because they're trying to tie Bloomberg together with Bush.
To Bush. And it's heckling him in a way, you know, silently. But it is effective, at least for getting on television. In that way, the Ferrer people, for whatever reason, they are talking about some of these important issues, but they're not doing. There's not a stagecraft.
So they need better media people. Let's talk about that.
Well,
I don't know who's media people
to break
are,
through all that money. I mean, this is, I know, an old theme, but to break through all that Bloomberg money, you have to be really strategic.
Let's take a caller who is going to try and make the case for Ferrer. Let's see. This is Luz in the Bronx. You're on CUNY TV. Hello.
Hi. Let me tell you something. I work as a psychiatric nurse in the community. I've been going up and down the buildings for the last 29 years. But I will tell you that during Ferrer's being the borough president, it changed. It became safer. It became cleaner. There were repairs of the buildings that were torn down and destroyed. There was a lot more community life. He built up a lot of places, malls. He beautified the Bronx.
So you're saying and I'm going to have to move on because we have a lot of echo on the line, but there's a case for Ferrer. He did it in the Bronx. He could do it citywide. Yeah,
but that was a while ago. You know, I mean, one of the problems that Freddie had in, you know, between 2001 and 2005 is, I mean, he had, you know, 2001, I think, in a way, was the peak of his visibility and attention and focus. And
the excitement around his campaign.
Exactly. And between 2001 and 2005, I mean, no offense to the Drum Major Institute, but what was he doing all those 4 years?
The think tank that he was running.
Right. It'll be interesting to see tomorrow. He's going to be going out with President Clinton to part of the Bronx, an empowerment zone that the two of them helped craft. One of his real hallmarks of his tenure as Bronx Borough President. But it'll be interesting to see people may say, well, that was 10 years ago. You know, the city is really different, especially after 9/11. How are you going to keep us safe? Why should we vote Mayor Bloomberg out? And
not to discount, you know, the great work that he did, but I mean, let's be real. Even if he wins 100% of the Bronx, that's still not going to make him mayor.
Right. But by the way, Pat, that Marty Markowitz story that we played, why is the Democratic borough president? I mean, Brooklyn is the bluest county in America except for the Bronx.
Right.
Why is the borough president supporting the Republican mayor, and does he risk paying a political price himself?
Well, it's possible, but Marty is an independent operator. He walks his own road as he likes to portray himself. Will he pay a price? Who would he pay a price to?
I don't know. And he has essentially been reelected.
Yeah.
And so it's his last term
because
of
last
term
term.
limits.
There's not a great risk, and I think a lot of Democrats around the city do think that Mayor Bloomberg is going to get reelected, or at least don't feel like Freddie Ferrer is in control of the dynamic in this campaign. So it's a real question. Is there any risk? And I would throw that open. I think it's a really interesting question. In this city anymore, is there any risk? Is there any Democratic machine or power center that's going to come down? It's not going to be Hillary or Chuck or Spitzer. You know, they're not going to clobber heads.
And I would even add that I think that the Eva Moskowitz endorsement was actually much more interesting.
Democratic, chair of the City Council Education Committee. She has butted heads with the mayor in the past over his education programs.
Yeah, and and everybody knows that she is quite possibly looking to move up to City Hall.
Right.
Down the
well,
line.
maybe she's looking at doing the same thing that Bloomberg did originally, which is taking that detour around the heavy Democratic pack and running in the Republican primary and saying, well, but look, it doesn't mean anything in New York. I don't know. In the context of New York City, Bloomberg is trying to be a rhino, a Republican in name only. And let's take a look at some of those campaign commercials. Given the relative fortunes in this race, it's no surprise that our commercial count during these 8 newscasts was 12 for Bloomberg, 1 for Ferrer. So let's look at a spot from each of them, focusing on one of the most important issues to New Yorkers this year, affordable housing. And look how different these spots are. Mayor Bloomberg first.
When I first came to New York with nothing but big dreams, I was amazed at how expensive housing was, and that was 40 years ago. I know how tough it is to find affordable housing, and we're working hard to help.
A first-time homebuyer assistance program, $3 billion to build and renovate affordable housing, and tougher requirements on developers to help get middle-class housing planned and built. Housing is a tough issue. Real leadership is helping.
So one of Mayor Bloomberg's affordable housing commercials with his usual high production values and message of we're doing well. Now here's Freddie Ferrer's spot, which focuses much more on people's troubles.
Used to be, even if Manhattan was too expensive, New Yorkers could afford to live in Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, or the Bronx. Not anymore. That's why we need more affordable housing for those with lower incomes and the middle class. Because New York's running out of places where New Yorkers can afford to live. It's one of the things I don't like about the city I love.
So, Carolina, it's a great city. It could be greater. The Ferrer campaign theme, although nobody really knows that slogan, it's there at the end of those ads. Pretty different commercials.
Well, it's an okay slogan. It could be better. I mean, again, in the substance, he's completely right. I mean, if you look at if you look at the kinds of things that are happening in Bed-Stuy, in the South Bronx, in terms of housing, I mean, he's completely right. And all those things that you saw in the Bloomberg commercial may also be true. But sometimes when I look at what passes for affordable housing, I'm shocked. I mean, it's like I can barely afford it, and I make pretty decent money.
And Freddie has real credibility on this issue. I mean, in terms of housing advocacy, in terms of for everything from his biographical story, which is very appealing from where he came up on. Whereas you see the start of Mayor Bloomberg's commercial, and he's talking about, I know how hard it is to find affordable housing. You know, that's a little risky. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to talk back to the TV. Yeah, right.
I didn't move into Gracie Mansion because my home is nicer.
Right. But the flip side problem is, as you pointed out, the production values. You know, you've got an animating, energetic, on-the-move imagery coming from Mayor Bloomberg. And with Freddie, it's this one solid image. Granted, it's him speaking directly to New Yorkers, which is somewhat appealing. But it's also a little bit flat, and it's just basically asking New Yorkers to nod their heads along and agree with him that he's right. And to get to that point, New Yorkers have to know you and like you and be ready to do that. And it's a real question of whether there are enough people who are even at that point to find him credible.
And I guess a single camera shot, talking head spot like that could be powerful in its spare simplicity. But
if it's Bill Clinton. You know, seriously, right? Yeah. It's got to be. It's a person who's going to hold you in a certain way,
or a real, real dramatic, compelling story. Yeah. I mean, some of the biographical stuff would have been great there. I mean, it's like if Bloomberg can talk about his biography of coming to New York and quote unquote not finding affordable housing, which I find hard to believe. How much more compelling would Freddie's story have been there?
But he also doesn't pay it off, I don't think, with a positive message at the end. He is only playing to people's frustration. And he doesn't say at the end of the spot, I can make it better. Right. Here we go. Right. We're going to...
It's one of the things I don't like about the city I love. That's great that you love it. I mean, I love it too. But pointing out the negatives and sort of closing on that, And then the idea of, it's a great city, it could be greater, which is, amorphous is sort of a slogan.
Different media people.
Right.
We've got a theme going. One more Bloomberg commercial now, and with a 12-to-1 ratio in the commercials we counted, we could go on all night, but here's one Bloomberg commercial that focuses on women's health.
In our city, breast cancer affects too many of our mothers, sisters, and daughters. Mike Bloomberg's changing that, investing over $1 billion in our public hospitals to update equipment and improve services. And he's expanded breast cancer screening. More than 200,000 women have received free or low-cost mammograms.
That means we're going to find breast cancers early when they're more treatable, which means we'll save a lot of lives. Mike Bloomberg is the most pro-public health mayor I think the city has ever seen.
Well, in a city that's obsessed with housing, education, and jobs, you have a lot of money when you can devote a whole spot to breast cancer.
And you're going to save people from cancer. I mean, it's an avalanche of advertising spending, and it's interesting. It's so interesting. Mike Bloomberg. I was at a parade the other day. I saw 7 different Bloomberg for Mayor signs, one for Italians for Bloomberg, Albanians for Bloomberg. He is able to micro-target in these communities, and this is just one, a fairly expensive ad that targets women on health issues. Again, as we said, it's not a high-polling issue in this race, but it does hit home the sense that he cares about priorities that matter to a broad cross-section of New Yorkers, and he's doing something.
And it portrays, or it just kind of exudes this image, this feeling of reassuring competence, like so many of his ads.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that beginning of that ad makes you think, I will cure breast cancer. Right. I mean, it kind of comes off like that. But on the other hand, I have to say that, the Department of Health has been doing really amazing work in the last 4 years under Tom Frieden. So I do think that he can claim a little bit of credit for that. I mean, some of the campaigns that that he was able to push through that nobody would have ever thought could have been successful in New York, the smoking being the most notable of them. So the Department of Health is very activist and very involved and very aggressive, and that is something that he can claim partial credit for.
Philanthropy, his private philanthropy, has run very much toward public health. The Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health is the Bloomberg School of Public Health for all the money he's given.
It'd be hard to knock it as anything more than sort of a genuine, sincere
and
concern.
still, as you say, Carolina, the beginning of that ad, the words kind of caught me up short when they say, too many women have breast cancer. Mike Bloomberg is changing that. What? But, if there are programs out there, then more power to them. Let's look at another video clip. This one is actually not about the mayoral race, and it's rare in journalism that we can revisit an interview that we did a few weeks ago and say, hey, we seem to have caught this person trying to mislead us, but we can say it tonight with respect to a guest from our September 21st show on the proposed mega development for Prospect Heights, Brooklyn, including the Nets Arena and 17 office or residential towers. The guest was Marie Lewis from a group called Build, which supports the controversial development and calls itself a grassroots organization not connected with the company that wants to build the development, Forest City Radnor. Here's how part of our exchange went. To what extent, just by way of full disclosure, is your group funded by Forest City Radnor?
Wow. I mean, we are not funded by Forest City Radnor. From our inception, we've been asked that question all the time, and it's very interesting to us, especially many folks coming from communities of color. We wonder, why is it that folks think that we cannot think for ourselves? Why is it that we can't have our own authentic perspective on this project and have one that's multi-dimensional?
So that was last month. She even just about accused me of being racist for asking the question. But in IRS filings made public since that show, we learned that the group had listed $5 million in Radnor money that it expects for next year's budget. The group now acknowledges that they took $100,000 this summer. That was before the interview. And with the debate over the Radnor complex still very much alive, we thought we owed it to you, our viewers, to correct the record. Carolina Gonzalez, you're following this controversy in Prospect Heights, aren't you?
Yes, this is my neighborhood. I actually live in Prospect Heights. So, yeah, I mean...
And it was your old paper, the Daily News, that dug out these IRS records and looked at that little $5 million figure down there.
IRS records are great. You know, you can always look those things up. You know, God bless them. You know, you can find out all kinds of things. Well, I mean, you know, she can say whatever she wants, but the fact is Prospect Heights is a very small neighborhood, and it's a very small community. I mean, even people who don't know each other know each other. You know, this has been rumored pretty much since Build started. One day, Build didn't exist. The next day, it had a couple of offices. And, you know, Prospect Heights is still relatively cheap in terms of commercial space, but, you know, I do know that everybody talked about, you know, where they're getting their money to do things from the beginning.
Right. But let me give them this much credit. This group, I think, is connected to the Assemblyman, Roger Green, who doesn't represent Prospect Heights, I don't think, but he represents some of the neighborhoods nearby that have a lot of unemployed Black and Latino men who really support the idea of this project because it will create jobs.
Right, and there's been a lot of controversy about, you know, sort of basically the way that Acorn has supported the project.
Another grassroots group
that we
know is taking money.
Yeah, so, you know, there's been, it is a very complicated issue. I mean, nobody wants to be against people having housing, and nobody wants it to be against people having jobs. But again, you know, here you have another example of somebody with a lot of money who is basically dominating the debate. And he has, you know, Ratner has allowed very little space for, you know, any discussion of what the real issues are.
And Pat, do you see this, before we go, as a mayoral issue at all? Because I know Ferrer supports the development, as does Bloomberg. I did get to ask Ferrer in the debate at the Apollo Theater, I wrote a question that Dominic Carter asked him, which was, would you support the use of eminent domain to take any private property to help Ratner build, which Ratner wants to do as a last resort? Ferrer said no. Does the mayor say no?
Well, it's absolutely a political issue, and we'll see if he gets into a second term just how important this project is, if it's akin to the West Side Stadium, you know, to what extent, you know, he would go on this issue, because eminent domain is absolutely an issue in these neighborhoods, and it's these kinds of sort of slip-ups, you know, sort of political spin, trying to, you know, challenge what the meaning of funded is, you know, that really makes you look bad and damages your credibility.
Well, the meaning of out of time is right now. So Pat Healy from the New York Times, Carolina Gonzalez, formerly from the Daily News editorial board, now freelance reporter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if the mainstream local TV news is abdicating its role as provider of campaign journalism, we'll continue to do some of it. In a minute, we'll look at one issue that's largely missing from coverage of the race, the fate of the city's home health aides, many of whom work full-time but still live below the poverty line. We'll talk with an organizer of home health aides from the Healthcare Workers Union, 1199. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Hi, I'm Matthew Goldstein. New Yorkers are choosing CUNY colleges in record numbers. CUNY has a world-class faculty and state-of-the-art facilities. Come visit our campuses located in every borough. Talk with career advisors and financial aid experts. Contact us at cuny.edu or call us at 1-800-CUNY-YES. CUNY will invest in your future. Invest in CUNY now.
Is I had this real rich, wonderful literary legacy, you know, in my own family. And I began to tell those stories. And in telling those stories, I think I've become much more successful. I mean, I think that Intimate Apparel is a direct outgrowth of being true to who I am and true to my own voice.
I have an insatiable curiosity, you know, and I am always very curious while I'm working on something. What about if I turn to this next? I guess I want to make sure that I've explored all that there is to explore.
When I write my plays, I hire these beautiful actors to stand in for myself, and they can voice my ardor in ways that I could never do in public.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here every Wednesday night at 7:30. An unusual thing happened this fall on the way to the Healthcare Union Local 1199 endorsing Fernando Ferrer. Mayor Bloomberg's campaign made a big show of not getting the endorsement because, claimed the mayor, he refused to cave to a demand to put 25,000 home health aides on the city payroll. Now, this means thousands will continue to work for poverty wages, and in a privatized system in which middleman agencies take money that could go directly to the aides for taking care of New York's sickest Medicaid and Medicare patients. Now, for the record, candidate Ferrer has also not promised, at least not publicly, to hire the home health care workers directly. And with me now is an organizer from 1199 SEIU who works with those home health aides who are unionized, Juanita Perkins. Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Let's do a little Home Health Aides 101 for our viewers. Who are these people and what do they do?
Well, I'm sure many people in our community see them daily. They're usually women of mostly from minority groups, Latin, African American, Africans, Russian, various ethnic, new immigrants, I would say, who come from different cultural backgrounds, usually single head of household, women with children, but they're caring for the elderly, the handicapped patients who. But for unfortunately, they are in agencies that are for profit, and they don't have the same coverage as our brothers and sisters who are home attendants.
So there's a distinction. There are home attendants who do work for the city with city benefits and all of that.
Which is usually includes medical benefits, education benefits, but home health aid agencies, which tend to be for profit, which is under the system called CHARS, Certified Home Health Aid Agencies. The employer basically pays them just barely above the minimum wage, and their medical benefits, if there's any, is usually paid from the employer. I mean, they might have maybe a medical service that might be well known to us as the general public, but it's not a benefit that's paid by the employer. It's paid by the worker. So maybe 25 or a certain amount of money is taken out of the worker's pay for their own medical coverage.
And what's the difference between an aide and an attendant? What's the different
I mean,
work?
a lot of them have similar duties. For example, a home attendant is not allowed to do certain medical procedures. A home health aide is allowed to do, like you say, vital tests, for example, pulse, respiration, colostomy. They're allowed to do certain more medical procedures under the guidance of a nurse. Home attendants basically are companion caregivers. They do errands in general, the same as the home health aide, but a home health aide has more medical training, but unfortunately their pay is much less than a home attendant.
We have our phone number up on the screen. I don't know if there happen to be any home health aides watching right now. If you are, call in. 212-251-0801, 212-251-0801 as we talk with one of the 1199 organizers, Juanita Perkins. Who are these middleman agencies?
Well, most of them, like I said, they tend to be for profit. Like I said, they're under a system called CHARS, Certified Home Health Aid Agencies, usually subcontracted through hospitals and different hospitals in the city. But their agenda is different than, like I say, the Human Resource Administration, where the money that comes down, and just like you had said earlier, there's Medicaid and Medicare-based funding that's also involved with the CHARS, but it's still more for profit in the home health aid agencies than the home attendants. And this is why the home attendants have right now they're growing to get better benefits, and this is where we want our home health aid brothers and sisters to be in the future.
So this thing that happened with Mayor Bloomberg and the union, just before the union announced its endorsement of Freddie Ferrer, the mayor's campaign said, look, 1199 tried to hold us up and get 25,000 home health aides put on the city payroll. We weren't going to cave to that demand, so let them go endorse Freddie Ferrer. What's your understanding of that?
I mean, I'm an employee of 1199, and I was on and all the particulars of that negotiation, if there was with Dennis Rivera and other people from 1199. But from just what I get as an employee there, that he was not willing to be supportive of the home health aides, and we really need them to become under the system of the HRA so that they can get the benefits and the funding like the home attendants have, because it's been more than, for some home health aides, more than 10 years. They supported 1199 by joining 1199 as members, but we don't have contracts with them. And it's kind of like a black eye on us as a union, because we know that these people work like nurses' aides in hospitals, but they're living they're living in poverty practically.
Now,
go
ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
well, Freddie Ferrer doesn't want to look like he's being held up either. So at the endorsement announcement, he said, I'm not going to put you on the city payroll either.
Well, I don't think he specifically said that. I just think that he's going to be willing more to work with us for our agenda. I think he's more in touch with our members. No offense to Mayor Bloomberg, but I mean, he's a billionaire, and I don't know if he can even relate to the lives of our members. Most of these members live check to check. They barely can make their bills. Like you said, they don't have medical coverage. They don't have the general services that what we're espousing to do to be a working person and here in New York City. So we felt that Fernando Ferrer was supportive more of the goals of 1199.
When you say supportive more of the goals, or that he's going to work with you more on your agenda, what does that mean specifically?
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm not official, just for my own feelings. I'm speaking for myself now, because I don't want to say that I'm speaking.
All right, speak for yourself.
But for myself, I just felt that he's more in touch with the members. He's a grassroots person. He came up in a poor community, much like some of our members, so that I think he can relate to how it is to pull yourself up in the bootstraps. You know, he wasn't born rich, and that he can, and being a person of color, I'm sure he knows all the obstacles which a lot of our members face in this field. We have many members, unfortunately, who don't speak English. This is what limits them to, in a lot of ways, that they can't branch out to other fields in the healthcare industry, for example, in the nursing homes or hospitals, because of their language barriers. And home health aide and home attendants is like an entry-level way to get into the healthcare field.
Let's take a phone call. Joanne in Ocean Hill, you're on CUNY TV. Hello.
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 Hi. Are you a home health aide?
Yes, I'm a home health aide.
Oh, hi. How you doing?
Tell us about your work, and tell us what you think about the political situation.
My job is, the job is not to, you don't feel comfortable on the job, because when you get the training and then you go on the job, it's a horse of a different color. The training trains you to work with the patient under the doctor and the nurse's care. And when you get to the patient's home, the patient expects you to clean and do everything else that you're supposed to be doing, as required by the doctor and the nurse.
Joanne, are you in the union?
I think I am. I'm not certain. I get letters from the union.
Oh, can I? If you don't mind asking, what agency do you work at?
I work at Allen Healthcare.
What is that?
Allen Healthcare.
Allen, oh, well, I think those are one of the sites that we might be organizing. Technically, they don't have a contract with 1199.
What is her obligation to clean or do other housework at the direction of the patient?
Well, most home care workers, and I'd say that in general, whether they're home attendant or home health aide, like you said, they're supervised under a nurse, and they're given a care plan, which they have to do certain duties. But basically, they're not allowed to do any real serious medical procedures. But you get that exactly what the caller is saying, that when an aide comes into a client's home, they're very vulnerable because they don't have a supervisor. They're really under the ruling of the client, and sometimes they have family members that want them to perform other duties that's not their task. And if they don't do it, then they're usually threatened sometimes from the client that they don't want them, which puts them vulnerable to being unemployed.
How much can the union do in support of individual home health aides? Because they go to one person's home for a while, then they'll be placed in another person's home, sometimes even day by day, depending on the situation. So it's not like a workplace where you have a union hall or something like that.
Well,
how do you help them?
Well, as being an 1199 member, and I hope that her agency does get a contract soon, she will be, you know, represented by an organizer, and we do have monthly meetings. We send out a lot of literature. It's a hard industry because it's not like you're in a hospital or a nursing home where you could walk on the floor and say, everybody come in the room and let's talk about what our agenda or goals is. Everybody's isolated in different households, and you're subject to whatever that household conditions are. But I mean, 1199, I think, has been in the forefront of really organizing and trying to be effective more with any other union for home care workers.
Let's take a call from, I think, a patient who was served by a home health aide. Beverly in Tribeca, you're on television. Hello.
Yes, I want to tell you that I have had some wonderful aides. I think they are grossly underpaid. They are given a program of care by the visiting nurse. But the people who send them out have no idea, and they, by their own admission, will tell you they have no idea about who they're sending out and that person's capabilities. I have had, in the past several months, people who cannot wash a dish, who cannot wash me, which I need because my arms and legs are not working, and that is one of their duties. So what I'm saying is, I heard your program last week on the radio where 2 agencies are getting paid before they get to the poor workers. The poor workers would be much better workers if they got more money and were screened as to their capabilities.
Beverly, thank you for your call.
I agree with her. Unfortunately, like in all industries, you have people with different levels of training. Some people have long, very lengthy training. Some people, I hate to say it, it's like 2 weeks training. So you're going to get a different level of care. And a lot of the agencies, it's true, don't screen people. Now it's getting more stricter. People now, effective of this year, have to be fingerprinted. So I think they're trying to do a better job. But you're not going to recruit quality workers with $6 and $7 an hour pay.
Good luck to you, Beverly. So, you know, Mayor Bloomberg, as we were talking about in the last session, does have a very good reputation on issues of public health and cares a lot. Can he work with you after this public show of throwing away your endorsement?
Well, I mean, that's up to the officers of 1199 to make that decision. I feel that you know, we're not going anywhere. This is a very viable, potential, very strong group of workers who just in our numbers, we have a strong political force that he would be foolish not to work with us because 1199 has a strong reputation of, you know, once we endorse somebody, we are very effective at getting people elected. And also, my issue with him is that when I heard that he potentially would not support us, is that what you don't give us in time to help these workers get better benefits, you're going to pay out in another way. If they have to rely on the system for food stamps, housing subsidies, then what you're not giving us to give us dignity for the workers to get paid up front, then you're going to pay at the other end.
And very briefly, when you say you trust Ferrer to work with you on various of your agenda items for the aides, what are some of those items short of actually being put on the city payroll?
Well, at least being open to our needs as home care workers, that we want to get contracts for these home health aides. And I think the only way, I think that Ferrer is open to us, at least maybe working with some of these employees or getting us funding, which is so important for these workers to get the home health aid increases and to get better benefits.
Juanita Perkins from 1199, thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, Larry Beinhart to talk about his new book and website called Fog Facts. They are out there somewhere, these facts, lost in the fog. If only America could find them, how different our national politics might be. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Political Assassination, a series of documentaries trying to understand the logic of political killings.
Mondays at 9 a.m., 3 p.m., and 9 p.m., and Saturday at 11 p.m. on CUNY TV, Channel 75.
World famous art star.
What? Oh, there's something like it. To make art.
What's going on in New York?
Art or something like it.
And I'm a photographer.
The life of an artist or something like it.
I say,
watch out or something like it.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights this fall at 7:30, and now we will go searching for fog facts. What are fog facts? Well, according to my next guest, they are facts that are out there, that have been reported somewhere in the media, but that have gotten lost in the fog. Facts like what Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist did before being elected to office and its relevance to his policy goals, or how media companies make money off dissatisfied customers. They come from a new book called Fog Facts, Searching for Truth in a Land of Spin, published by Nation Books. The author is Larry Beinhart, best known for the book and movie from the 90s, Wag the Dog. Hi, Larry. Welcome
Hello,
to
Brian. Glad to be here.
Wag the Dog first. That was about a president who used a war to distract the country from his sex scandal. Accurate?
That is an accurate depiction of the movie. The book was about George Bush I and about how the war in the Gulf War I, was a made-for-TV movie. Okay. So, by the time the film got made, we had a new president and a new ambiance, and they changed it.
The movie with Dustin Hoffman.
Right. Terrific movie. I loved it.
And Robert De Niro. And in fact, people at that time said, hey, wait a minute. Clinton's actually doing this when the Monica Lewinsky broke, because the film came out that year.
It came out just a couple of months before the Monica Lewinsky story broke. Yeah.
And then with things that were going on in the world with Al-Qaeda and with Iraq, Clinton bombed Iraq, he bombed Sudan, he bombed Afghanistan, and some of his critics
said it was a wag the dog.
Wag the dog. Did you think so?
No, I didn't, but I liked Bill. If I didn't like Bill, I would have thought so.
Right, okay. Fog facts.
Fog facts.
Let's put one up on the screen.
Okay, which one you got there?
Let's see which one comes up first here. It has taken longer to get Al-Qaeda than it took to defeat both Germany and Japan in World War II. Why is that a fog fact? Give us the context.
Well, it is the context. Here we have what was essentially a criminal gang. I think when we started, after 9/11, we were told that there were maybe a couple of hundred people in Al-Qaeda with a couple of thousand associates. And we've gone into, a couple of things. We've gone into a state of permanent war, searching for this guy. Oh, by the way, I'd like to issue formally for the first time on television the Fog Facts Challenge. The Fog Facts Challenge is this: if you give me $200 billion, I will give you the head of Osama bin Laden within 18 months or whatever. Okay?
Your point being the United States is spending that much money.
Spending that much money on top of the use of all our armed forces, all our intelligence services, ostensibly to fight the guy who bombed the World Trade Center. And not only don't we have him, we don't seem to care.
So this fits your definition of fog fact, because it's a bit of context that you think is missing from the debate.
Well, it's hugely significant, and I'll tell you why it's hugely significant, and why I issue the Fog Facts Challenge, right, is if I had that much money, and my intention was to get Osama bin Laden, I'd have him, as would you. I'm sure that you could effectively get Osama bin Laden for $200 billion.
Either that or I could run a mayoral campaign.
Right,
I'm not sure which.
One or the other. And so what this suggests is that maybe the war on terror isn't about Osama bin Laden, and that it has different intentions.
I'm going to give you, viewers, another Fog Facts Challenge, and this one you can do for free. Call us up with your fog facts. Anybody have one out there? One of those facts that, if only America knew this, politics might be different in this country. Our lines are open. If any of you has a fog fact, and maybe Larry will even put it on his website or in the sequel to the book, 212-251-0801, 212-251-0801. But you know, the right, and you obviously come from the political left, the right also uses a World War II piece of context that they think is missing from the debate right now. It's even in your book, but they use it in a different way. That in the entirety of World War II, 290,000 Americans were killed in combat. Another 100,000 died over there. God knows how many were injured. The fact that we've only had 2,000 dead in Iraq, Americans dead, they say is an indication that this war is not that costly in terms of American lives. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm not sure that that's how the equation works.
In all this time, same amount of time, so few deaths.
Well, originally we were fighting 2,000 or 3,000 people at the most, as opposed to fighting two heavily armed countries. One country which had conquered all of Europe, another country which had conquered a huge section of Asia.
There are more insurgents than that, but
well,
clearly
now,
it's not Nazi Germany.
It's not Nazi Germany, and it's not Imperial Japan. Right. But it seems to me the context of that is this. The administration announced before the invasion of Iraq that the occupation was going to be modeled on the occupation of Germany and Japan. And I've Googled occupation Germany, Japan, or occupation of Germany. One of the first things that comes up is an official Army report on the occupation. And it says that when Eisenhower occupied Germany, he only occupied a sliver of Germany. The Russians had another chunk, and the French and English had other pieces of it. For a sliver of Germany, he had 1.3 million men on the ground in Germany, and about 3 million men in Europe. They immediately became the Army of Occupation. The Army theorists and historians say that this demonstrated to the Germans that they were an occupied country, there was no point in resistance, and in fact, there was no resistance, and they credit that to this. So if,
3 million. 3 million American troops
in Europe, and 1.3 or 1.7 in Germany, right? So I mean, there was a GI and a Jeep on every corner. They were directing traffic. They were dealing with the food supply, the electricity, the rebuilding, the justice system, the traffic courts, everything.
Well, look at it this way: soon we'll only be occupying a few slivers of Iraq. So there'll be a parallel. Let's put up another of your fog facts from the book Fog Facts. In December 1994, Al-Qaeda hijacked an Air France plane and attempted to fly it into the Eiffel Tower.
Right.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Why is that important?
That's important because the President and Condoleezza Rice and other members of the administration have told us that nobody essentially could have imagined the attacks on 9/11. If you want to parse things very narrowly, they said nobody could have imagined that they would have hijacked two airliners, fly them into both buildings and the Pentagon. But in general, they were saying we could not have imagined those attacks. And there are a whole series of things where those attacks were imagined. There was a Fox television made-for-TV movie that involved the hijacking of an airliner and an attempt to fly it into the World Trade Center. There was an Al-Qaeda plan, or at least the Italian police thought there was an Al-Qaeda plan to attack a meeting of the G8 group in Genoa.
Including President Bush.
Including President Bush was
attack
there.
by flying a small plane into the meeting.
Well, no, I don't know if it was a small plane. But
a plane.
A plane, and they closed the airspace over Genoa during the time of the conference, and George Bush had to go sleep on a U.S. aircraft carrier because they were feared for his safety in the city.
So when Condoleezza Rice says nobody could have imagined this kind of scenario.
They had imagined it. In fact, they had a drill at the Pentagon, a safety drill, where the scenario of the drill was an airliner flown into the Pentagon. So lots of people had imagined it, and it was on the record.
Let's go right to another one, another fog fact. Within 2 weeks of the FBI's publication of the names and photographs of the 19 hijackers, at least 7 seem to have turned up alive elsewhere. Alive?
Well, there were reports in places like the Washington Post, the New York Times, the BBC, that the people whose names and pictures were shown on by the FBI either reported themselves, or the Saudi government, in one case, reported them as still alive. Now, I don't know if they were, okay? I don't know if it's true. I just know that it was in reputable publications. And the other thing I know is that when the 9/11 report came out, it didn't address that issue. It didn't say, oh, by the way, those reports were garbage. You know, we checked them out, and it's not true. And the other interesting, the thing that always seemed remarkable to me is how the FBI, they announced 18 of the people in 2 days, and they added the 19th on the third day. In 48 hours, they knew everybody supposedly who had been involved.
But
how did they know it that fast?
You know, I was curious, in fairness, to know more about that one after reading that part of your book. So I went and did a web search, just a basic Google search, on two of the names. The two brothers.
Right.
And the Al-Shari brothers. And there were articles about them having been living in Delray Beach, Florida, before the attack, and they disappeared after the attack. They never came back.
The two brothers, apparently, the story on the two brothers is there are two brothers. A lot of names in Arabic names are very similar, okay? So there are apparently two sets of brothers, one who, in fact, did disappear.
But you're not one of those people who thinks the United States actually attacked the World Trade Center to justify the war, are you?
No. I'm not. No, and as I said, I don't even know if these people are living. I'm just saying there were reputable reports that they were, and when the big official document, the 9/11 report, came out, it didn't address it.
One more fog fact. This one's from your website,
okay,
not from the book. By the way, what's the web address?
It is fogfacts.com.
Bill Frist is a very rich man. At the time of his first Senate race in 1994, he declared his personal holdings as $20 million, and $13 million of that was in HCA stock. HCA is the largest healthcare company in the country. We're going to run out of time in about 45 seconds. Why does that matter to national policy?
HCA is not only the largest healthcare provider. They were the subject of a 10-year investigation for Medicare, Medicaid, and TRICARE fraud. They pleaded guilty to a certain number of counts and ended up paying a fine of $1.3 billion or $1.7 billion.
So your point is, when Frist takes positions on health care, we have to know that context.
Absolutely. And the money from those frauds is the money that made him rich and the money that funded his Senate campaign.
All right. Larry Beinhart is out there looking for those fog facts, and they're on his website trying to bring clarity through the fog at what? Fogfacts.com?
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's it for tonight's Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live every Wednesday night at 7:30. Next week, we continue our series, The Mayor's Race as Seen on TV. Meanwhile, I hope you can join me for my radio show every weekday morning at 10 o'clock on WNYC, New York Public Radio. Tomorrow morning, the debate on stem cell research. That's at AM 820 and 93.9 WNYC tomorrow morning at 10. Have a great night.